Hi and welcome to another episode of Peacemake TV. In this video, I'm going to be taking you through step by step how to create this multi-column layout. We're also going to take a look at how we can specifically ensure that this works exactly how we want it to on a mobile device. So I'm going to show you how we can do all of that right now. So before we kick this video off, if you're considering purchasing a copy of Elementor Pro either now or in the future, and you'd like to help support this channel, please consider using the affiliate link in the description below. This gives us a small percentage of each sale and helps us to develop the channel and grow the content and the regularity of the content that we can put out. Okay, so before we start developing this page, let's take a look at what's actually going on, specifically concentrating on what happens when we have different kinds of mobile devices. Now you can see to start off with, we've got quite a few of the Elementor tools being used in this. We've got gradients, we've got full width backgrounds, we've got negative margins being used, we've got interactivity when we take our mouse or finger over the actual phone itself. We've got a multi-column layout, we've got an embedded image in the center of it with a caption. There's a whole range of different things going on. So what you're going to find is if you follow along with this video, you're going to get a good understanding of some really fundamental and key techniques you can use when developing either a sort of entire website, a single page, or landing page. So this is the layout as it looks on a desktop, but let's take a look at what happens when we start to shrink this down. So if we reduce the size of it again towards the sort of tablet scale, you can see what happens is the pull quote becomes smaller, so it doesn't sort of grab so much of the real estate we've got on screen. The heading becomes centralized and smaller again, and so the position of the text and the position of the phone itself adjust accordingly. If we go smaller again, so we go into mobile phone size, you can see now we end up with a smaller heading. We centralize the text at the top. We've now moved the phone down to its own space below. And again, we've repositioned things. We've moved things around. Instead of being a 2 or 3 column layout, we're now down to a single column layout, the pull quote and the heading centralized. And we scroll a bit further down, you can see our image is in line as well. So there's a lot going on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you step by step through every single part of creating a page like this. So started off, we're in the admin section of WordPress and I've got a new page created. Now I'm using the free GeneratePress theme, but we're not going to be using that specifically. We're going to be using the Canvas theme that comes, or the Canvas template that comes as part of Elementor. This gives us a completely blank template that we can work with. And this is great for doing things like landing pages or one sort of page sale pages where you don't need to worry too much about the navigation and so on. Obviously, these techniques are universal and can be used across everything you want to do inside Elementor itself. So don't worry if you want to use a specific theme. Okay, so we need to set a few things up. We've given the page a title. We need to come down to the template option, and in there I want to choose Elementor Canvas. I want to come down and just set some of the preferences that are specific to the GeneratePress theme. So I'm going to make sure that there's content with no sidebars, and we're going to make sure that we've got no content title, so that's all being hidden. So we have a 100% blank page. I'm going to hit publish just to make sure that we save those changes before we start using Elementor. Now we're ready to start invoke Elementor and start creating the content and laying things out. So let's just click edit with Elementor. That's going to open up the editor and allow us to start working with the creation of the page itself. So we'll kick things off by working our way right the way from top to bottom of this particular page. So the first thing we need to do is put that full width picture with the gradient overlay and the text on it. So let's just do that. First of all, let's click add a new section. And in there, we're going to specify we want 2 columns. So we've now got our 2 column layout. So let's just select that block and we're going to come over to the style to start off with. And we're going to specify that we want an image in the background. To do that, we just click on the classic background type. And you can see now we can choose the image we want to work with. So we can click, and then we've gone through to our media library, and we're just going to go through and choose the image that we want to work with. And that's going to be this one of the mountains. And we'll click insert media. Once we do that, you can see that now inserts the image in there, and we need to set a few other things up before we'll start to see what we want. At the moment, there's no padding or margins or anything being used in there, so we're literally only seeing a small sliver where we've got our 2 column layout. We can adjust that really, really easily. So first up, let's set the position of the image. We want this to be center to center. So we see the center of the mountains. We're going to leave the attachment, the repeat, and the size and everything left at their default values. We don't want to set anything in there. Next up, we're going to jump over to the background overlay option. So you can see in there, we can now specify whether we want to just use the normal and or the hover state. So this is one of the new features that's been added into Elementor, which gives us the ability to mouse over something and it'll change parameters. For this, we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to use normal. We're going to specify that we want to use a gradient, and in there we can now go through and set the foreground and background colors. So we're going to choose the foreground color. And for this, we're going to use this darker blue. And we're going to let this go down now through to this sort of purple color underneath. That's looking pretty good. And we'll leave everything else bar the opacity. We're going to drop that down a little bit more. Not too much, but I found that it works better if we're around about 0.4. So that's looking pretty good. Like I say, you can only see a small part of that in the background, but we'll address that next. Okay, so to give us some more real estate around the actual header section itself, we're going to go into the advanced section, and what we're going to do is we're going to set some padding up in there. So we're going to make sure that we can control each individual item. So we're going to click on there, the little chain link to turn that off, and we're going to set this now to 150 for the top and 150 for the bottom. As soon as we do that, you can see we now start to see a lot more of the actual header content. Okay, so we've pretty much covered that. Next thing we want to do is just jump back over now to our widgets, and we're going to go through and specify we want to put a heading. So we're going to put a heading into this first block. As you can see, we need to go through and set some styling. So first up, let's put in the actual text I want to use in there. And next up, we're going to go and set some of the basic parameters. We're going to set this to be, we'll make sure that we've got the HTML tag 2. That's fine for this. I don't want this to be a main heading. And we want this to be right aligned. Next up, we're going to jump over to the style option. We're going to start setting some of the style parameters. First thing we want to do is specify that we want to have white text which stands out. And the next thing I want to do is go through and set some typography values. I want this to be around 72 pixels. That's looking pretty good. And we're going to specify a specific family. So I want to use Nonito. And that's fine. And the next thing I want to do is just change the weight. I want something a little lighter. That looks pretty good to me. I leave the transform and the style as they are, and the line height and the letter spacing are both fine. So we've kind of got the basics there. Next up, we need to make just a couple of little alignment or adjustments to this to make space for when the phone goes in there. So let's just jump over to the advanced section. We'll do the same again. We're going to unlink the padding, and we're going to specify 110 pixels for the top. And for the right, we're going to set that to 30 pixels. So it just gives us a little bit more space for the side of the actual phone itself. Now, we're dealing with, at this point in time, just the items for working with the desktop. Some of these things we're going to come back in later on, and we're going to adjust and change based upon the different types of devices. For example, a tablet and a phone. But for now, we're just going to get the basic structure put in place. Then we can fine tune and tweak the various different things for the different types of devices. So now that we've got our header in and we've got our large text at the top, we need to put in the phone. Now, you'd kind of think that we put this into the right-hand column, but we're not going to do it that way. We're going to use negative margins, and we're going to create a two-column layout underneath. So we're going to come down, we're going to click on Add a New Section, we're going to create a two-column layout, and this gives us now the space to put our phone in. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the right-hand column, we're going to click to add in an image. So you can simply drag that over, drop it in there. So we've now got the space for our image. What we're going to do is just come over to the left hand side. We can go to the widget, and in there we're going to go and select our image. So we'll choose the iPhone mockup, and we'll just insert media on there. So that's now put the image into the right hand column, and as you can see at the moment this is now sitting below our heading. So what we need to do is just set up a few parameters in there, and we're pretty much good to go. So making sure we've got that selected, and making sure that we've got that center aligned, what we're going to do is we're going to come up and we're going to set the advanced options. And in there, we're going to create some negative margins, and that's going to allow us to sort of pull this up the page and overlap the heading section. Now, when it comes to working with negative margins, a certain aspect of this is going to be sort of trial and error to find out where you need to be. So we're going to go up to our margins. We're going to uncheck the option now so we can set specific values. And we're going to set in here minus. Now this is one of the little quirks that I find annoying about using Elementor inside Chrome. I don't know if it's Chrome specific, but for some reason it won't allow me to put the minus sign in when there's a 0 value in there. I have to put in the positive and then go in and set the negative afterwards. But as you can see, that's put it pretty much where we want it to be. So that's now aligned nice and neatly on the right hand side, and everything is set up as I want. So pretty much that's all there is to using negative margins to allow you to space and position things and overlap elements above or possibly below, depending on how you want to do it. So pretty easy. Once you know how to do it, you can use this in loads of different ways. Next thing I want to do is just add that small amount of interactivity to this image, where when you take your mouse over or you take your finger over it on a mobile device, the phone actually shrinks back a little bit. And that's really, really easy to do with Elementor. So what we need to do is jump over to the Style tab, and in there you can see we've got hover animation. We've got a whole range of different options available in there, so you can use whatever you want that you think is relevant. We're going to use the shrink option. And we can click on there, and we're just going to leave the default values and everything in there. So you see, if I take my mouse over, that now shrinks back. So it adds just a little sort of level of interactivity when you take your mouse or something over the phone, just to sort of just add a little bit of sort of motion in there. So pretty simple and straightforward. So there's the basics of our header setup. We've now got our negative margins with the phone overlapping, some interactivity, and we've positioned everything as we want. Next thing we need to do is move on to the 2 and 3 column layouts below, and then we can start going back in and specifying exactly how we want these to work on different mobile devices. So let's move on to the next section now, where we start add the content in. Okay, so next up, let's go and create the next section, which is our heading. So we're going to come down to add a new section, going to click in there, and we're going to choose the 2 column layout. Once we've done that, we're going to come in between the 2 columns. I'm going to drag this over to adjust the width. Now I'm aiming for around about 33%. That looks pretty good, because when we do the 3 column layout below, we know that if the first column is 33% and the next two is the next one is 66%, that's going to align itself nice and neatly with the columns below. So let's go and put those in next. So we go add a section, 3 columns, and you can see now we've got everything in place for our heading and for our 3 column layout. So let's go in and put our heading in there. So we're just going to drag the heading option down, drop that in there. Again, you've got the option in there that says what style and so on do you want to apply. And we're going to go in and change this and say article heading. Let's go and spell that correctly and take out the horrible spacings. Okay, so we've got the heading in there. So now let's go through and style that. Now we used Nonito as the text style last time. So we're going to do the same again. We're going to jump over to the style option, come down to the typography, change the font family, and we're going to choose Nonito. Once we've chosen that, we're going to adjust the weight. We're going to set that to 300, and we're just going to adjust the size to fit. So we're going to drag that out until we get a heading that I kind of feel is a nice size. That looks pretty good. We'll keep it about there, around 80 pixels. Okay, so we've got the basics now of our heading setup. Next thing we're going to do is we're just going to put a simple underline in there for that. So we're going to come down onto the advanced option, and we're going to come down to border, and on there we're going to uncheck that. We're going to specify that we want a border type to be dotted. We're going to set the width at the bottom to be 1 pixel, and we're going to specify a color of a light gray. Now you probably can't see this too well on you at the moment, but it is there. Next thing we're going to do is we're just going to quickly jump back up to our style, and we're going to grab our line height, and we're just going to adjust that to give us a little bit of space so we don't have the line going over the G where we've got the lower letters dropping down underneath. We don't want to sort of overlap those and get a kind of weird effect. So just adjust the line height on there to compensate for that, and we're pretty good on this. The next thing we want to do is jump down and start adding in the actual physical text content. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to our widget picker, and we're going to go on to there, and we're going to choose what we want. We're just going to grab the text editor and drop that first of all into the first column. So drop that in there. We're going to replace that text with my text. So you can see that now updates and shows us everything we want in there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to adjust the styling on this to make sure it kind of fits in with everything else we've got. At the moment, it's a little bold and stands out a little too much. So we're going to just make some adjustments to that. As always, to make these alterations, we just need to come over to the Style tab, and in there we can go through and configure everything. So we'll just set the font color to a nice dark gray, and what we're going to do next is we're going to just make sure that we've got everything laid out the way we want. So let's expand the typography option, and we're going to go into there, change the font family again for Nonito, because we want to see that consistency throughout the site. We're going to come down to our line height, and we're going to adjust that slightly. So we're going to just adjust that until I kind of feel it fits where I want it to be. So Around 1.4 looks pretty good, and we're going to adjust the font size slightly. So I think probably around about there looks pretty good. I like that. Next up, let's just change the weight on there. I want this to be a lot lighter than the heading, so we're going to go for 200. And yep, I like that. That looks pretty good. So before we continue on, let's duplicate this because we want the second column just to use the same style formatting and so on. So it's going to duplicate this. So just check it, hit the duplicate icon, and then we'll just drag that over into the second column. Now, what I want to do is I want to make this first column look more like a magazine. So we're going to use the drop cap function on there. So we're going to come over, making sure we've got the first column selected. You can see on the left-hand side now into the content section, we now have an option for drop cap. All we need to do is check that, and you can see that puts in the drop cap. So now we can go through and adjust and style that. And all we need to do that is jump back over to the Style tab, and if we scroll down, you can see we've got drop cap available to us now. So we expand that out, and you can see we've got the sort of normal layout options that we have. We can choose the color, we can choose the border radius, the typography, and all those kinds of things. So we can get really creative at this point. We're going to keep it fairly simple for this example, but I'm just going to show you some of the options. Let's go through and we'll expand the typography out. And we're going to adjust the size. Let's just bump that up until we kind of get something that sits nice and neat in the layout, making sure that it kind of fits well. So round about there looks pretty good. We're just taking up 3 lines. Again, let's just make sure we're using the right font family, which is going to be Nanito. This time we want to make it a little heavier, so we're going to use 600. And yeah, I kind of like that. That looks pretty good. So now we've got that nice drop cap. It's not too big, so it kind of forces the 2 different columns to look unequal. So that's looking pretty good. What I am noticing though is that these 2 columns are just a little too close together. So I want to fine tune the spacing on there just to make sure that we look more like a magazine layout where we've got a nice gutter in between the 2 columns. And we're also going to go and put in the pull quote on the left hand side. So to do that, we're just going to make some fine tweaks to the margins on the different sections or the padding on the different columns. So let's take a look at that next. Okay, so adjusting the padding on these is really, really easy. All we need to do is make sure that we activate the column that we want to work with. Once we've done that, we're just going to come over to the advanced section, uncheck the option that links everything together. And then for this first one, we're going to adjust the padding on the right hand side. So I'm going to set a 15 pixel padding on the right hand side, and we're going to repeat the same thing now for the second column. Only difference is we're going to use the padding on the left hand side. So we're going to click to activate that, jump over to the advanced tab, uncheck the option on there. This time we're going to go over to the left hand side, and we're going to put 15 in there. So now what we end up with is a nice margin or gutter in between the 2 columns, so it's nice and neat, gives us plenty of space, plenty of breathing room and white space. So very easy. So the last thing we need to do now on this section is go in and put our pull quote in there, which is going to be used to sort of draw attention to what this block of our page is all about. Very popular in magazines and works really well on websites as well. So again, this is really, really easy. We're just going to come in and we're going to specify we want to drop some text in there. So jump back over to the widgets, and from there we're just going to come in and we're going to say we want the text editor, drop that in there. That now puts in a text block which we can go in and start styling and adjusting. Okay, so first off, let's put in what we want for our pull quote. So we're just going to drop that in there. As you can see, it looks a little bit sort of lackluster at the moment, so we need to make that a little bit bigger and a different font and color to draw attention to it. Now we want to make this pull quote stand out and look more like a quote, so we're going to be using a font, something along the lines of Times New Roman, a typical sort of serif font that has the little curls and swirls, just to make it look like it's a quote from someone. So to do that, we're just going to make sure we've got it selected, jump over to the style section, enable the typography, set the alignment to be right because we want to sort of flow over to the right hand side of our layout, and from there we're now going to go through and specify some of the basics. First of all, let's change the color to this darker blue, and once we've done that, we're going to bump the size up, take this up quite large, probably around there, around 48 looks pretty good, and we're going to go through now and specify the font. So we want to use Times New Roman. We're going to set the weight to be 300, and we're going to specify that we want this to be italic. There we go, that's looking pretty good. And we're going to adjust the line height a little bit, just so we can control that. Round about there looks pretty good. Yeah, I kind of like that. Okay, so the next thing we want to do now is separate that off a little bit from the columns of text. So we're going to use a border on the right hand side of that. So all we're going to do is come over to the advanced option, scroll down to border, and from there we're going to uncheck the link, specify the border type is going to be, for this example, we're going to use solid, and we're going to specify that we want this to be unlinked, and on the right hand side I'm going to go for something simple like, let's try about 3 pixels to start off with, and we'll give that a nice pale grey kind of colour, just so it doesn't stand out too much. Now obviously the problem we have there is it sits flush against it. So what we can do is just come in there and specify that we want to adjust a few things. So just going to come over onto the element style section, and from there we're just simply going to give it a little bit of padding. So uncheck that on the right hand side. We'll try about 15 pixels. That's looking pretty good. And we're also going to put a bit of margin there. So we're going to uncheck that. And again, on the right hand side, we'll put about a 10 pixel margin, just so to pull that over to give it some nice clear separation from things. Okay, so let's just hit save now so we can save the work that we've done. Let's close this down and we can take a little look then. So we're looking pretty good. At the moment, I've got one little mistake that I've done, which is I put the border around the entire thing, which we'll deal with in a moment. But as you can see, the basics of our page are almost complete. We just need to put in the image that sits underneath these 2 columns, and then we're going to go back in and take a look at how we can set up the mobile responsive options, how we can make sure that everything looks the way we want it to. So first of all, let's just deal with the outline that we have on there, the border all the way around. So we'll just select that, come back into the style option. Actually, come back into advanced, I should say, come to border. As you can see, I'd left those checked, so all I need to do is specify 0, 0, and 0. And now if we sort of shrink that down, you can see we've dealt with that problem. So pretty easy to deal with. Nothing's written in stone, and that's the beauty of working with something like Elementor. You can easily go back in and adjust things to get exactly what you want. Okay, so let's now put in that photograph. So what we need to do, we want to match up this 3-column layout because we want our photograph to sort of be aligned with these second 2 columns, leaving this gutter down the left-hand side like a magazine. Now, as always, Elementor makes this really, really easy to work with. So we're just going to add a new section, add 2 columns, and we're just going to literally drag this over to make it 33%, like we did previously. So there we go, 33 1/3, looking pretty good. There we go, bang on. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go back to our widget section, drag the image widget over, drop that on there, and now we can go through and set up the basics that we want on this. So let's choose our image, and for this example, we're going to just use this picture of a lake. So we'll insert the media. You can see that now puts the picture in there. So the next thing we're going to do is just go and add some options into it. We're going to put in a caption underneath. We're going to put a drop shadow and a border around it. So all really simple, but all these little things help to make it look good. So all we need to do to add a caption is simply come out to the image widget on the left hand side, click in there, and we're going to drop in our caption, and you can see that automatically puts that in underneath, so everything is done. If we wanted to, we could link this image to something else, but we're going to leave it as it is. We don't want to do that. Okay, so we've put the image in there. The next thing we're going to do is jump over to the style section. We're going to put a box shadow on there, and you can see now that puts a nice shadow around there. But we want to make this look more like a sort of photograph that's been stuck on the page. So to do that, we're just going to put a simple border around things. So still in the style section, what we need to do is just make sure we've got the border option. So if we take a look, you can see we've got the border style. We're going to set that to be solid. We're going to make sure that this is set to white. And once we've done that, we're going to put a 5-pixel border all around the image. And you can see once you've done that, that now makes it look like we've got that Polaroid edge to the image. Really, really simple. That's all we need to do to it. So you can see we can very quickly and easily create great looking images that stand out off the page. If we wanted to, we could duplicate this section and drop a couple of other columns underneath there. But for the simplicity, we're going to keep it as it is. So let's hit save. And let's take a look at some of the problems we now have with mobile-based layouts. Certain aspects of what we've done are not really going to translate very well into mobile. But because Elementor allows us to fine-tune and tweak how things work on a mobile device, on tablets and phones, we can use the power of that to quickly and easily correct any issues that we see when we take a look at what they'll look like on a mobile or a tablet. So let's take a look at that now. So for this, let's leverage the power of the preview option. So we can see we can jump into responsive mode. So we click on there, you can see we have 3 options available. At the moment, our default is the desktop. We can take a look at this on both a tablet and a mobile. So let's start off with a tablet and deal with any problems we see on there, because certain things we can correct will then flow on down to the mobile device as well. So let's click on tablet, and you can see now this shrinks everything down and allows us to see what it'll look like. So you can see on the whole, it doesn't look too bad, but there are a couple of things we can do to address some of the problems on here. So we can see that at the moment, this just looks a little bit too big now on a smaller device. So we can adjust that if we want to very easily. And to do this, all we need to do is activate the element we want to work with. And if we come over to the left-hand side, we've got all our controls. You can see we have certain different sections have these 3 little icons. Now, you don't always see those because if you're working in desktop preview mode, you will by default only see the desktop preview icon, which is the first one. But you can click on that and you can then take a look at the options and tweak the options for specific types of devices. Because we're looking at this in tablet or mobile view, that expands it out and we can see the different options that are available. So we can now go through and tweak the style, for example. So we jump over to style. You can see size is one of the options we have available to us. So we can now fine tune and tweak this for how we want it to look and appear on a mobile. So let's adjust this, and you can see it's all in real time. So we can adjust that to get it closer to where we want. So that looks pretty good. Okay, I kind of like that. So that now gets rid of some of the excess space that we have. If we want to, we can adjust various different parameters for this as well. So there are a couple of other things I want to tweak on here at the moment for this first block, and I want to jump over to the advanced section, and I want to set my margins and padding to be zeroed out. So we've got 0 on all of those, and that's just going to tighten things up on there and get rid of some of the excess space at the top, which on a mobile device isn't really necessary. On a desktop, we've got lots of real estate. It's great. On a mobile device, we want to sort of get rid of some of those little things that don't work great. So that's the heading section. I quite like the way that's looking. You can see we still keep the interactivity. But if we scroll down, you can start to see some of the issues that we can see. The heading is now way too big. The pull quote is still a little too big, which is kind of taking up some space on the left-hand side that we could sort of free up and just tidy things up a little bit. So let's go through and control the way these aspects of the layout work as well. Again, all we need to do is click on the element we want to edit. So we're going to click. That now makes this text block, this heading block, editable. So we're going to do a couple of things. First thing I want to do is I don't like the sort of heading being left aligned on a mobile device. So we're going to just hit the center on there. We're going to come up to the style section and we're just going to simply make this smaller. So we're going to drag this out until we get a heading size that I think works nicely. So that looks pretty good. Looks like a nice heading. So we're going to leave that where it is there. Next thing we're going to do is come up with this pull quote. We're going to click to edit that. Again, come over to style, and we're just going to simply make this a little smaller. So we can adjust this, and just the fact it's all done in real time just makes the whole process so much nicer to work with. So there we go. We've now set that up. Scroll down, everything else looks pretty good. So for our tablet, that's looking pretty good. We've dealt with some of the problems on there. Next up, let's jump over to the mobile phone and take a look at some of the problems we've got on that. So we click, and you can see if we scroll to the top, we're starting to get a few more problems. We're getting things like overlaps, the text doesn't look quite right, things just look a bit of a mess at the moment. So let's go through and adjust things on there to make sure that everything looks great across all the different devices. Okay, so let's tidy up this phone to start off with so we can see what we're working with. So let's just come down, make sure that I select the right object. You can tell, there we go, we've now got the right object selected, so we want to make a couple of little tweaks on there. First thing we're going to do is jump over to the advanced section, and we're going to do zero out these margins. And what that does is, because we placed a negative margin on the on the tablet and on the desktop, that sort of brings it up over the heading. On a mobile, we don't want that to happen. So by getting rid of those margins, pushing it back down, we put the natural alignment in there, which kind of tidies those problems up. Also means we can now see the heading that we have at the top, and we can sort that out. At the moment, it's right aligned, which looks a little bit weird now because there's no context for it. So let's click, select that, change the alignment on there. Kind of makes a lot more sense now. Next up, we're going to deal with the additional spacing that we have in here. So we need to do this inside the actual header block itself. So we're going to click to activate that. Make sure we're on the advanced tab on there. And what we're going to do is we're going to set our padding to 0. You can see that now gets rid of the excess space on there. So we're looking pretty good. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come into this section and jump into the advanced section on there. uncheck, and on the top we're just going to put, we'll try about 15 pixels. Yeah, that actually, let's go for about 20 on there, just to give us a little bit of space on this. That's looking pretty good. I like that. So we've got our basic elements there all sorted. So we scroll down now and we can see that our heading and our article pull quote and everything all look a little bit weird. So we need to adjust those as well to make sure that they sit in well with this particular design. First things first, let's grab that heading and let's make it a little smaller. So let's just come into here and we're going to adjust this to make sure it fits nice and neat and tidy. That's looking pretty good. Next thing we need to deal with is the pull quote. So we're going to select that. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that that looks a little bit better. So we're going to come out to style, and on there we're going to get rid of this border and so on. So let's just jump over to advanced first of all. Go to border and we're going to zero these out. I don't want that on there. Yeah, that's pretty good. And we can come over the content. And we just select that, put that in center line. That looks okay. That's fine. Okay, so we've now dealt with some of those inherent problems. Other things we've got to take a look at is if we scroll down, you can see we've got that margin on the right-hand side there, or that padding on the right-hand side, and the second column is on the left-hand side. So we kind of have disjointed column alignments. Again, very easy to deal with. All we need to do is select the first column, jump over to the advanced section, making sure we've got the right thing set up on there. What we're going to do is zero these out. So 0, 0. You can see that immediately adjusts it to where we want. Coming out the second one, click in there, do exactly the same. 0 margin, 0 padding. Everything else now sits nice and neat and tidy. So all looking pretty good. So when we go over to a mobile device, like a phone, this now translates nicely. So let's just close this down and we can take a look. So you can see now where the guides and everything have gone, everything sits the way you want. Obviously you can spend a little bit more time to make sure that you've got rid of every little sort of extra bit of space in and so on, and restyle, maybe put a line under there. However you want to sort of deal with these things. You could even sort of hide things based upon the device that they're being viewed on. But the reality is we now have a layout that works across 3 different devices. We've got it that works great on a desktop, it looks great on a tablet, and looks great on a mobile. Everything done inside Elementor very quickly and very easily. And that's pretty much what I wanted to do. I'm going to hit save now, so just in case I lose everything. But you can see we now have a really nicely laid out page with a whole range of different Elementor functions, tools, and options covered just to create something like this. So hopefully what this has done is it's given you the confidence and the skills to be able to take this into your designs and do a lot more and get really creative with things across all those different types of devices. Well, I hope you found the video useful. If you did, please hit that thumbs up and hit the subscribe button to be kept up to date with all the content we add every single week. If you have any comments, questions, or feedback on this video or anything else we cover on the channel, please pop those in the comment section below. And until next time, take care.